submitted to the Colorado Secretary of State on the state bank has been very, very difficult. They are, I mean, they're arguing with it and so on. It's getting appealed to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court, which should have answered in 2 weeks, took 6 months. Took longer than that, actually.
Right.
I mean,
And so
I
on.
think the reality of getting
Well,
one
it
vote,
even
one
gets down
county.
to the title, and that's one of the things that I'm wondering about as you're going through all these complicated, you know, you've got all these secondary things that are really primary in their own right with water and banking and finance and so on. But how do you put something through, even on the titles part of what the Secretary of State's going to require? They would challenge that unless you break it down into other initiatives. And that, I was just wondering as you were talking about that, Jeff.
Well, I'm certainly not an expert on citizens initiatives and state ballot initiatives. I mean, we're going to have to carefully, I guess, on that topic. I mean, that is the bigger challenge, is you have a state government that is, we're asking to dilute their power all the way from the Supreme Court to the legislature, the governor's office in 2014. And they're not going to give that power up easily, right?
Well, they aren't going to give it up. The trick, it seems to me, is one of the big questions that I've been asking ever since I started working on the state bank issue is, how do you get rid of too much centralized power?
Right.
And the answer is you decentralize the power in order to maintain the quality of services and levels that are there.
Right.
And that's what I'm looking at, and what you're saying is how can that be done? Because I think
if you think about it, there's dozens of battles that need to be fought,
Yeah.
dozens of constitutional amendments that need to be put forth, and all of them have their merit and value, right? And all of them, maybe over the next 10 or 15 years, we could fight some of those and win some of those.
we don't have that much time economically.
Yeah.
This country's bankrupt.
Right.
And most of the people are walking around living in a dream world because the stock market's up, and it's only up because they're printing money. I mean, it amazes me that the biggest story of the first 2 weeks of this month, I haven't heard anybody say one word about, I'll be damned, we don't have a chairman of the Federal Reserve right now. And Bernanke's been gone since the 1st of September, and they're trying to push it on Geithner. He doesn't want it. They're trying to push it on Larry Summers.
He said no way.
Well, they got a video out about Larry Summers that pretty well put a kibosh on that one. But I mean, the only way to get rid of too much centralized power is decentralized while you're moving forward with the things that you're talking about. I really believe that. I think what you're doing is great.
Yeah, thank you.
The ultimate decentralization is the reaffirmation of the Declaration of Independence. That's all there is
And
to
we're
it.
going back to that. I mean, that's why we are going back to the Declaration of Independence. I mean, as the starting point for our movement. And that's, if you've heard that book, but one of the steps we're taking is discussing when, I think now, not if, but when we will have a Declaration Convention. And the reason I say when is originally I thought, let's do this in January. We're going to get through, hopefully get a bunch of new counties on board, use the model of the Continental Congress, 2 people per county to come in and do a Declaration Convention. But having heard from these guys in California and Maryland and see where they are, and the guys in California are much further along in their thought process than we are in some areas. I think what would be really powerful is to wait a few months and do multiple Declaration Conventions in the same weekend in 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 or 7 different states.
Yes. That carries much more weight.
Yeah. Yeah, because I mean, at this point, people have looked at me like, Declaration Convention, are you really sanctimonious? What's the purpose of that? And it's like, the purpose of that is we want to declare independence from the state of Colorado. And let's use what's been done before as a model. Yeah.
And really, one of the reasons that we started talking about this back in January, and I was asked to write that document. We think that we need to take the time to do it right, and that's why we don't have a ballot initiative this year, because it would have been rushed.
Right.
And we did not want to rush it. We want to do it right, so that they can't come back and say, okay, you're a bunch of lunatics.
Yeah.
And so that's why it excites me that the other counties are doing this. But we need to do it the right way, and that's why I love the idea of waiting on a declaration
Right.
to get a bunch of them done. The power of the people is coming back slowly
Right.
but surely. Those recall elections over in Colorado Springs,
Right.
those were, in Ron's district, that was a 30% turn in her
Right.
district, from
Right.
18, plus 18 for Obama to minus 12 for her.
Right.
Huge turn, and I think
Yeah.
that
was amazing.
is the
Mark
key.
Levin's having
And it
a
was
pretty
not
big
just about
conversation on
guns.
this right now.
It was about those people not listening to their constituents.
Right. Yeah, and that's,
And that's the key.
right, and so that's where people, yeah, go ahead, make your comment, yeah.
I'm sorry, I don't want to interrupt.
Yeah, no worries.
But I was just wondering, these pockets like Denver, Boulder, Telluride, Aspen, some of these, the sand people, as it were.
Yeah.
What are you gonna do with those people? I mean, it's like, can we ship them to New York or something?
Well, we have to have a contiguous state, so I don't know if the right answer is just doing the Denver Boulder corridor with a little pocket, so the keyhole concept, if you will, portions of Adams, portions of Weld, or Arapahoe, portions of Jeffco, and making a little, or it is taking that and including, trying to carve away into some more of the quote-unquote more progressive or liberal counties. That's, I think what we're more focused on right now is how do we get people on board that we know agree with us in terms of this model, which is not a Republican concept. This is not, the Republican Party will not support this. I can almost guarantee that. I mean, not that we've asked them, nor do we want their blessing. I'm a
I
registered,
can guarantee it 100%.
I'm a registered Republican, and I ran for state house last year as a Republican. So I'm not saying the Republican Party doesn't have its value, but this is taking the power away from the parties, both parties, all the parties, and returning it to the people. And that's a big challenge to,
Yes, it is.
yeah. Yes, sir.
Yeah, it seems to be a law of nature that if you can imagine it, the left will try to co-opt it. Education, garden clubs, anything.
Yeah.
So one concern for the future is if this movement gets traction and it looks like it's going to go somewhere, the left will attempt to co-opt it. Have you thought about how to respond to that?
I don't see how they can co-opt it to the benefit as long as we keep true to these core principles. I mean, if they want to co-opt their county and take that county in a direction that's different than the rest of us, then more power to them. That's the concept of local control. That's their definition of liberty. It's definite. I can guarantee that people in Boulder have a much different definition of what liberty means than the people of Mesa County. So we can't. If you want to force your agenda on them, if you want to force a Mesa County model on a Boulder County, then you're really no different than Denver forcing itself on the rest of rural Colorado. I mean, that's
Exactly right.
what's good for the goose is good for the gander.
So would your model allow then, for example, a Telluride pocket that
Absolutely.
governs itself in a Telluride sense?
There's, I mean, that's when we met with Huerfano and Los Animas counties, and we said we're going to respect local control as a cornerstone of this new state. And I don't know what frankly, I'm not sure that really means a lot to those counties differently. I mean, you look at a blue and you look at a red, and some counties, there's really not that much of a difference in values. It's who is controlling the power in those counties.
Exactly.
You know what I'm saying? Going back to special interests, it may be, or just maybe lazy voters. Or maybe, what's the terminology everybody likes to use?
Low information.
Low information voters. We gotta empower those people. We gotta talk to them, and that's the person. That's what those guys did in Pueblo and Colorado Springs. Is they got out there, one by one, and won people's hearts. Said these are our liberties that have been taken from us, and they talked about how important it was for those inalienable rights, in this case, to be restored and to protect those. We can win those arguments. It's just going to take time and focus and dedication.
And here's why the left won't co-opt this movement. When I was in Colorado Springs helping on the Morse recall, I got into a debate with the Democrat who came up, so I took him aside and let my wife and the other person there sign people up for the recall while I didn't let him bother them. And they laughed at the idea that counties would walk away from Colorado. And I told them, you have ignored the rural areas so badly that one day you're going to wake up and they're all going to be gone. And you're going to be left with yourselves.
Yeah.
And he just laughed at that concept. And that's the thing. They can't believe it will happen because they don't have a concept of history. They don't believe, they don't understand what happened in the 1700s, so they think it was a joke. all they can think of is the Communist Manifesto
Progress.
was the beginning of history, and that's what we're following.
Yeah. But most people, I think, across the political spectrum, when you go up and say, I have my values, you have your values. I don't want to push my values on you. I don't want you to push my values on me. Let's just agree to govern in a way that is local, that is
Right.
more reflective of the communities we live in. I think you get a lot of people on the left that's either one will buy into that argument, or respect what we call the right to self-governance and self-determination. Either will respect that and say, hey, I have no problem with that. I respect your right to want to be able to do whatever you want in your county, as long as you have the same respect for me. The other side of this, frankly, is when you go to a statewide ballot, if we are leaving the state of Colorado, forming our own state, that aggregates power for the people that remain.
Oh, yeah.
And so you get
They
the
love it.
hardcore people, and even most of those folks, I don't think really get the urban versus rural subsidies. I mean, you can make that argument either way. I mean, you can find a microcosm. You can find education funding, for example, and see how education funding is larger in rural school districts because they're smaller school districts. So you can, I mean,
But
we just use,
they attempted to use that argument
right.
with me, well, you guys will lose all your funding. I'm like, no, we'd actually have more funding because we'd have more control
Of our local resources.
of our own resources
Right.
to fund our stuff. Right
Right.
now, we're not getting the money back that we're paying into the state.
Right. Yeah.
You had a question a minute ago. Yes.
Sorry. I think this is great, except I think you're missing one big point. And that is Aristotle said that the perfect form of government is marriage. And that if you want to look at how your government is, look at your marriages. And I really believe that we have to reform families, that we have to be able to support this Constitution and say, we have virtuous people here.
Yeah.
And until we educate, and until the families come back together, and until the families say, I am in charge of my children, I'm educating them so that they can understand where history stands, this will not go.
Yeah. Well, I hear what you're saying. In essence, we have a very dependent populace, and that dependence is abdicated its role as parents, as primary teachers of their kids, as an example of how education, as primary role of protecting our family, so they abdicate that to the police, and they're not. Yeah, I mean it's across the board, and I think it is. The government has empowered the entitlement society through growing, but those choices people have to make to take that power back and take responsibility back have to happen one by one. It's certainly not something we want the government involved in, but I totally agree. The government has enabled that, and I think as it sounds like you're passionate about that, and I'm sure you're working to try to encourage your friends and family to make good choices and to take responsibility for their actions and to take responsibility for the family. So I agree, but the flip side to that is, to some extent, having a bifurcated model of rural versus urban provides as a natural governor, if you will, or natural check and balance that doesn't exist right now. At least rural versus urban, and most of us would probably argue that people in rural communities are more family-oriented, that are more hardworking and appreciative of, I mean, there's always exceptions, don't get me wrong, but we have those type of values, I'll say it that way. So I don't know, do you want to follow up, comment, or?
I just think it's really important that the education piece, educating the families is really important. This will not go anywhere. I mean, it's pretty sad when you look. We have what, maybe 30 people here? This should have been packed.
I
agree.
Everybody should have been here with their children and their families and saying, no more. And so I feel like we have a long ways to go. Don't get me wrong, I think it's a great concept. I would
Right.
love to do it. But I think we're missing that key component.
Yeah, and I think there's two ways that can expand. I think you guys as individuals, we've seen that in some counties, so I'll just take Lincoln County and Morgan County as examples, what happened up there. So Morgan County, let's say there was some hard feelings, I would say, between some of the county commissioners in Morgan County and some counties and people in Weld County. And that's just that's the way I read it. I'm not going to pick on any one individually, but Morgan County just didn't want to get on board. They didn't do what it took to make sure people understood what was expected of them in terms of getting on the ballot. So people in Morgan County, they organized, and they talked to their commissioners. They invited us up to come to speak. Tom and I went up on a Monday night a couple weeks ago, and we helped kind of do the same thing. A group of about 40, 45 people up there came, maybe not even that big, about the size.
The room was full.
Yeah, we talked through it, and the commissioners responded, and they saw the people that live in their communities, they saw the frustration, they saw the desire to do something different, and the commissioner said, you know what, we didn't realize that you guys were this passionate about this topic. It took like 30 people in their county where the commissioner said, okay, we hear you, we're going to go hold some public meetings. So they had that first public meeting. They had scheduled 2 more public meetings before the floods hit, so I've canceled them. But I really believe that those 30 people in that county, or 40 people, however many it was, they changed the course of the way the commissioners were taking that discussion. Okay? Same thing happened in Lincoln County. Lincoln County was one of the original 10, as was Morgan County. They weren't going to put it on the ballot. One guy that I know of started getting the word out, come to the next county commissioner meeting. In Lincoln County, which I think is a county of like 5,000 people, they had 45 people show up at a county commissioners meeting at 9 o'clock in the morning on a Tuesday. That's like in Weld County, like having 1,300 people show up on a percent. I mean, huge turnout for their county. That day, those 3 commissioners, 2 said, yes, I support it. 1 said, I don't really support it, but I respect your right to have your voice heard. He referred to the ballot in a 3-0 decision. So Prowers County, we just went down there last week. One guy asked the county commissioners, would they give us a half an hour to go meet with the county commissioners and tell them our side of the story, give them kind of the pitch, so to speak. I believe Prowers County will turn. They will go. They want to have community meetings or seeking input. They will choose to participate in the process, which is all we're asking people to do right now. Not endorse, not commit to it, be part of the process. Now we've got 4 things. I love the idea of Wyoming. I didn't thought of that. There's other things I think that are littler things we can look at and use as leverage along the way that we need to really organize on. There's a ton of things that have been, there's a lot of little things people have said, have you thought about this, have you thought about that? Some things may have merit, some things may not have merit. Some things may have merit we may want to save for 2 years from now to play that card. But what we're doing is we're getting ideas, and we're changing ideas. The guys, a perfect example, the guy from California, he said that we're talking about state highway, and I've been thinking about that in the back of my mind. Do we need a state highway patrol? Why isn't the sheriff's office and all the counties, why don't they do all those functions? And he comes to me and he goes, you guys thought about state highway patrol? He says, I said, no, but I've been thinking about it, but we haven't talked about it. He goes, our concept is sheriffs do everything. There is no state highway patrol. And he started talking through and he's a law enforcement officer. He was a reserve deputy, I think, or something. So he started talking through the implications of that. I thought, well, I thought about that, but I didn't have anybody to talk to about it to understand what the implications would be in law enforcement. So that's maybe perhaps a threat of bureaucracy at the state level we could push down to the local level and not have it. Department of Education is another example. I think if we put our minds to it as a collective group, we can come up with dozens of those examples where you can practically push things down. He was talking about the concept of the memorandums of understanding between the sheriff's office and the federal agencies, which is a whole other topic. It sounds like you know a little about that. He goes, and in essence, the MOUs allow them to come in as federal agents and to do certain things. He goes, why don't we just turn that on its end and then say, we're redoing all our MOUs and no federal enforcement can happen in our county other than through coordinated by the sheriff, which is what people think should be the case, but it's not the case today. So that is
one of our state senators.
Yeah.
Yeah, Steve King, we can thank him.
Yes, who wants to be the sheriff here.
Yeah, so.
Can you imagine that?
Yeah,
I'm
so if
sorry.
we had a state government that saw that vision and backed up the counties on those, that could go in. And then in essence, we have what people would refer to as interposition. We have sheriffs interposing on behalf of citizens to make sure their rights aren't violated by federal agents coming in to their county. We met with a lady in Prowers County who had there was a valid search warrant searched against her, but she had 20 cars, federal officials, 20 cars, and 40 federal officials come in and raided her whole property. It was, in her mind, it was totally unfounded, and I'm sure it probably was, and I've talked to her. Sheriff had no idea it was happening. The sheriff had found out about it. If I was sheriff in that county and found out about it, I would have had my SWAT team going over. She thought she was being, like, I don't know, I don't know what was her terminology. She had no idea who these people were. So anyways, that's just another concept of.
We'll defer to Jeff here. after a recent, was it a month and a half or so ago, that he had the BLM guys show up. No ID.